We are live, ladies and gentlemen. When Elon Musk expressed interest in purchasing Twitter all of those months ago, years ago, I don't even remember, he was making himself a target of the political elites. In a recent development, leaked documents appear to show advisors to the Kamala Harris campaign have plans to, quote, kill Musk's Twitter. Elon Musk's response? This is war. Also, has the media completely lost it? Donald Trump's recent campaign stunt at McDonald's has exposed what can only be described as complete lunacy by the mainstream media. We're going to be talking about all this and more on episode 470 of the In the Tank podcast.
She looks at me and she says, "Oh, look at you. You're prettier than you're on television. Mike, look at her." No.
Oh, okay. All right, Jim. Thank you for that one. Welcome to the In the Tank podcast. As always, I'm your host, Donald Kendall, and today we've got Jim Lakely, VP of the Heartland Institute and editor of that clip right there that he just forced us all to watch. Jim, how are you today?
I'm doing good. I realized this week that with the election only 2 weeks away, less than 2 weeks away now, that we're not going to have an opportunity perhaps to play those opening drops with some Kamala clips in them. So I cut a few. You picked one of them at random. That was my second choice, but I'm glad you enjoyed it. And maybe we'll drop another one next week.
Yeah, enjoy might not necessarily be the word for it, but yeah, we'll see what happens. Chris Talgo also joining us, editorial director here at the Heartland Institute. How are you doing today, good sir?
Doing good. It's a nice day outside, Donnie. It's a beautiful day in the Chicago suburbs.
That is right. That is right. Yes, 11 days until election. We're going to be talking about that. Also, new book just dropped on Tuesday, Propaganda Wars by Glenn Beck and Justin Haskins. We'll talk about that. But before we talk about anything, I do have to put that message out there that I say at the beginning of all of these shows, that if you want to help out the show, you can do so in a number of ways. First, those audio-only listeners are probably catching the show on a Friday or later. Leave a review for us on iTunes. That would be greatly appreciated. And also consider joining us live a day earlier, Thursdays at noon, where we are streaming this on Facebook and YouTube and Rumble and X. And you can jump in the conversation, throw your comments and questions in the chat. Maybe we'll show your comment on the screen. Maybe we'll address your questions on the fly. You can't help us by sending a super chat because YouTube has demonetized us, but you can go to heartland.org/inthetank and donate directly to the show. That way, YouTube doesn't take a 30% cut. Just hitting that like button, sharing this content, subscribing if you haven't already, or leaving a comment under the video all helps break through the big tech algorithms and prevent content like this from being shown to more people. But as those people that are watching the show can see, we've got a number of topics on our little sidebar column there that we're going to have to get through. But the first thing that I want to talk about before we get to our main topic is this Trump's shift, Donald Trump's shift at McDonald's this past weekend. And I know this story in itself is several days old already. I don't think that we can ignore this story, though, and not necessarily him just going to McDonald's, but just the media's response to this campaign stunt. So in case you didn't see or you've been living under a rock, Donald Trump donned a McDonald's apron and worked behind the counter for a few hours at a Pennsylvania location on Sunday. Trump learned how to work the fryer, man the drive-through window. Trump, who isn't shy about his liking for McDonald's, had multiple reasons for this brief stint behind the counter. It's because it's, a campaign appeal to the everyman and those that work service jobs. But also, and probably more importantly, it was a bit of a troll against Kamala Harris, who has claimed that she has worked at McDonald's in the past, a claim that Donald Trump thinks is BS. And so when he was working there, he said, just working here for 15 minutes means that I've worked at McDonald's for 15 minutes longer than Kamala Harris. So the stunt itself went off pretty well, from what I can tell. Trump started off walking into the store saying that he was looking for a job. Little kind of funny, humorous interaction with the manager there. Drive-through customers were filmed getting their food from the presidential candidate and had an opportunity to voice their support for Trump. In one case, thanking the president for, quote, taking a bullet for us. So I think we have a little bit of footage that we can play of Donald Trump at McDonald's. This is, if you're not just like super callous of heart, you got to look at this and get a little bit of joy from this. So let's go ahead and play this clip, please.
By a human hand. Nice and clean. Of course, my hands are nice and clean. This guy's a good instructor. I appreciate it. Wow. I'm going to give a really big one so that, look at that, they're just pouring out of it. How good is that, Margot? Here, Margot, have them. Well, that's our good-looking group. Hello, everybody. This is not a normal situation, is it? What a good-looking family. How did you produce those good-looking kids? Oh, they look like the wife. They look like the wife. How are you? Nice to see you. Thank you.
All right. We appreciate all the this order right here.
Thank you.
We'll have you in Bucks County.
And there'll be no charge. Trump is paying for it. Is that okay?
2024.
Yes. Oh, you're going to some extra stuff.
Oh, okay, great.
This is all on Trump.
Oh, hold on.
I'm allowed to do that, right?
Yeah. Let's check and make sure it's everything you said it would be.
It's better be. It's going to be the best yet. I made it myself.
You're the man. Make America
That's
great.
their order. Thank you, man. Thank you. Thank you. Have a good time. Have a good time. That's great.
He had an impromptu. We could let the footage keep running there. He's got an impromptu, probably not impromptu. It's a planned little press conference outside the window. They had reporters asking questions and all of that. That was pretty much it, right? That should be the end of it. But instead of saying, hey, Trump did a kind of unique campaign stunt, cool, the media lost its mind. Like, seriously, lost its mind. So in the hours and days after Trump worked the McDonald's fryer, many in the media tried to undermine this stunt by attempting to expose Trump's time at McDonald's as a quote-unquote staged event. Can you believe it, everybody? It's a staged event. He didn't actually go there and get hired by McDonald's. Don't let him trick you into thinking that he was actually putting his payment information for his W-2 at the end of the year or something like that. No, it was a staged event. So I've got one of the worst articles that I think I've ever seen in my entire life. This was from Newsweek, and it was titled, "Was Donald Trump's McDonald's shift staged?" Oh my gosh. Does anyone think that it wasn't staged? Like, even the biggest Trump supporters in the world, does anyone think that this wasn't a staged campaign event? Like, it's just absurd on its face that a headline like that exists. But the article continues, rumors have been circulating on social media that Trump's visit to McDonald's was staged. The article then cites an unconfirmed letter supposedly posted on the front of the store explaining that the store was closed to the public during the event. But it gets worse. Listen to this hard-hitting piece of journalism right here. This is reading directly from the article. I'm not joking, everybody. According to a press release issued by the campaign, quote, President Donald J. Trump suited up for a shift at McDonald's in Bucks County, Pennsylvania. A full shift generally implies 8 to 9 hours of work, yet posts circulating on social media suggest Trump worked there for less. Got him. Surely the Trump campaign is just sunk after being exposed like this. I mean, Trump wanted us to believe that he got hired at McDonald's, worked a shift, but guess what? It was staged. Checkmate, Donald Trump. But, and this wasn't just some moron with a column at Newsweek. The article is indicative of a narrative being spun by a wide range of people in the media. New York Magazine, CNN, MSNBC, The Guardian, The New Republic, Yahoo, all jumped in trying to show that this was some staged event. Even Snopes jumped in to confirm that this was a staged event. So, Jim, I know we make a habit out of just making fun of the media and, trying to show how ridiculous they are on this show. But this one's got to go in the record books for just sheer ridiculousness. What do you think of, I guess, the stunt in general and then the media's response?
Well, I think it kind of goes all the way back to 2015 and 16 when Donald Trump first started running for president. Our absolutely clown show media does not take Donald Trump seriously, but they take him literally. So, when he puts on the apron and so they run these absurd stories that, as you mentioned, shocking news, he did not decide to suspend his campaign and actually just drop out of the race for president and start his new career as a fry cook at McDonald's. The analogy I thought of is, when George W. Bush threw out the first pitch at the World Series game after 9/11, he was not actually trying out for the New York Yankees. He was involved in a political stunt, and actually a great moment in America's history when he threw a perfect strike. That meant something symbolically for America. But as producer Andy had up there on the screen, although he doesn't have this tweet, but the potato Brian Stelter, who's now back at CNN, he had tweeted something to the effect that that the right-wing media was milking this stunt and turning it into a 3-day story. But as usual, the opposite is true. One of the great accounts to watch or to read on X is that by Drew Holden. He's basically the X's greatest receipt keeper. And he has a long list, a long thread of all of these major media outlets completely losing their minds over Donald Trump, going basically, and it's known that this is one of his favorite places to eat. He loves McDonald's food, for better or for worse. But the New York Times, French cuffs and French fries at Donald Trump's McDonald's gig. No hairnet in sight, it notes in this thing. And it just
going to
goes
get an
on and
OSHA
on.
violation for that. They're gonna bring him up on OSHA charges or something.
Right, that's right. And actually, these things kind of go in stages. They actually, as this kept getting reported for day after day, I think it actually has finally died down by now. But inevitably, our crack reporters in our complete joke of a corporate media, starts investigating the actual McDonald's and its owner, and if it has any health violations. And so this is the world we live in now, where our media will. This goes back many, many years. If you happen to oppose the regime, or if you happen to do something fun with Donald Trump, and when you see that clip, it's clear that he is having fun. It's clear that the employees at that restaurant are having a good time. And it's obviously clear that the people, oh my gosh, that they pre-screened to come to the drive-thru window so that it's not an assassin who pulls out a gun and blows his head off because he's already had 2 assassination attempts. So yeah, the Secret Service screened these people. But, the media just cannot allow, the modern day American Hitler to be in any way relatable. This goes back, we talked about it last week, the Al Smith dinner, which is a rite of passage, which is in our political life in America, where the two candidates, no matter how much they hate each other, will show up at a Catholic charity event, and we'll do a little bit of a roast, and we'll be tough on each other, but not mean. And it's kind of a way to heal our politics. Kamala Harris didn't go to that, and I'm convinced it's for this reason. You can't normalize the Hitler of Donald Trump by allowing him to do a stunt like running the fry machine at a McDonald's or telling jokes at the Al Smith dinner. So this is just indicative of what a complete joke our media is, and how frankly they work in cahoots with the regime, with the powers that be, as it were, with our government, to ensure that nothing but propaganda is ever disseminated to the public, to the point where they spend days and days debunking the idea that Donald Trump actually worked at a McDonald's. And they're really mad because they were trolling Kamala Harris, who has yet to produce any evidence that she has worked at McDonald's. The McDonald's Corporation itself said it has no records of Kamala Harris ever working there. Now, this is a silly and stupid thing to argue over, but Donald Trump didn't bring it up. Kamala Harris brought it up because she wanted to be more relatable to regular people, because she worked fast food, supposedly. I worked fast food. If I ever ran for office, one of the first things I guess you have to tell everybody is that I worked at Burger King and I got fired from Burger King because I didn't show up for work one day. I just completely forgot. I learned when you're on the schedule, you should show up or else you get fired.
Oh, that is a new layer of Jim Lakely that I was not aware of. He got fired for not showing up, not for stealing onion rings. Let the record show. Chris
Although that did
Talgo.
happen as well. I got away with it though.
Chris Talgo, you watch CNN and MSNBC so that we don't have to. Was there much coverage of Donald Trump's stunt over the weekend when it came to working at McDonald's? What was their take?
Yeah, I mean, it was, trying to make fun of it, trying to downplay it. And, I think the reason why is because they are getting very nervous because here we are now, less than 2 weeks before the big election day, and things are not looking good for Vice President Kamala Harris. And that is why I think they are in freakout mode. And this is just, the latest example of that. I mean, I think this has nothing to do with the fact that Donald Trump went to McDonald's and, worked there for a few minutes and, served French fries and all that. It was about, oh my gosh, he's getting more the good media narrative. We need to try to push back against this as much as we can. That's what I really think is going on here. And one of the reasons why I think Donald Trump's visit to McDonald's actually worked out well is because he's authentic. So Donald Trump went there. He wore his usual, suit and tie, put an apron on over it, and just did his thing. And then I contrast that with, like Tim Walz going hunting, and he's got this perfectly brand new, like hunting uniform on that's not got one piece of dirt on it or blade of grass on it. He can't even load his shotgun. So I think people understand that, and that's happening more and more. Kamala Harris, I think, is scared to do things like this because she will be exposed as a fraud. So this, I think, plays to Donald Trump's strengths. Donald Trump understands people. He's very good with people one-on-one. If you actually watched all those interactions, people were having a great time. Donald Trump was having a great time. The other workers at McDonald's were having a great time. And then I look at how Kamala Harris or even President Biden, when they go to, like a gas station or a convenience store, something like that, it is so awkward. It seems like it is super duper staged. This was organic. This was people just having fun. This was about, Donald Trump going to Pennsylvania and trying to, talk to the people, which he did. And he does that really, really well. So I think that's why the media is so up in arms about this. It's not about the hairnet or any of that kind of stuff. It's about, oh no, this guy that we are trying to portray as Adolf Hitler is actually going to a famous icon in America, McDonald's, and he's sitting there serving French fries to people in the drive-thru, and they're having a grand old time, and it's personalizing him. It makes him less of this evil dictator Hitler figure. It makes him actually just like a normal guy, and that's why the media is saying, oh no, we have to prevent this from actually resonating with the people. But it is resonating with the people, and nothing they can do can change that.
Yeah, you know what? I think what you said right there towards the end is exactly the right point. That this like humanizes him and takes away this like aura of him being some like fascist Hitler 2.0, like waiting to jump to power or something like that. And it makes me think of what show was it? Some late night show when he was running the first time around, where they're like, oh, like, can I touch
Jimmy
your
Kimmel.
hair or something like that? Right. And people like ragged on Jimmy Kimmel for a while because like that supposedly humanized him. The idea that he would be like modest enough to have someone ruffle up his hair during an interview or something like that. So we can't have that. We have to make him look like some tin pot dictator, and anything that kind of goes against that narrative has to be like pounded in the ground as much as possible. So I think you're exactly right on that. Jim, any last comments on this? Otherwise, we're going to get to our main topic.
Let's go.
All right. So this next story is a pretty interesting one. And the more layers that you peel back on it, the more insidious it becomes. There's a few different things at play, but we're gonna start here. So journalists Paul Thacker and Matt Taibbi from the Twitter Files, Taibbi, released a bombshell report that reveals the UK's Centre for Countering Digital Hate, which is advising the Kamala Harris campaign, has stated goals to kill Elon Musk's Twitter. So, reading from the article that was published by Thacker and Taibbi, it says, in an explosive leak with ramifications for the upcoming U.S. presidential election, internal documents from the Center for Countering Digital Hate, whose founder is British political operative Morgan McSweeney, now advising the Kamala Harris campaign, show the group plans in writing to, quote, kill Musk's Twitter while strengthening ties with the Biden-Harris administration and Democrats like Senator Amy Klobuchar, who has introduced multiple bills to regulate online misinformation. So apparently the Center for Countering Digital Hate is attempting to grow its presence in Washington, D.C. Like I mentioned, reading from the article, working with Kamala Harris and Democratic senators, their plan to kill Musk's Twitter includes attacking X's advertising revenue and laying the foundation for broader regulatory changes in the direction of platform censorship. One of their proposals is called the STAR framework, which calls for the creation of a, quote, independent digital regulator that could, quote, impose consequences for harmful content. This plan is similar to that of Europe's just instituted Digital Services Act and Britain's Online Safety Act, which puts the national media regulator Ofcom in charge of determining fines for uncooperative platforms. So this all sounds very Orwellian to me, and considering Elon Musk's promise of keeping X as a free speech haven, it just makes sense that it makes all the sense in the world that Musk and X have a giant target on their back, and they basically are just like enemy number one for all of these people that want to crack down on free speech under the guise of pushing back against disinformation or something like that. So, Jim, I mean, we've had several episodes recently that have all revolved around this seemingly new wave of attacks on free speech, again under this guise of combating misinformation. And I know that free speech and censorship are always kind of a discussion, but it really seems like this is starting to ramp up. Like it all seems like it's kind of coming to a head here. So is it too much to say that free speech, especially, looking at this, and we'll get into some of the ways that this UK group is working with Kamala Harris in a little bit, but is it too much to say that free speech, at least when it comes to online speech, is kind of on the ballot this come November? What are your thoughts?
It's very much on the ballot. I think that makes it. There's so many reasons why this actually is one of the most important elections in our lifetimes, and it's because we are choosing between freedom and oppression. We're choosing between the ability to speak freely on social media platforms and the opposite of that, which is the suppression of our speech, which is tyranny. I mean, this is just one of many examples of what this election is really about. That's why it's actually quite remarkable and very encouraging that Elon Musk is not just supporting Donald Trump for president. He is stumping for him in the key state of Pennsylvania, giving to packed crowds. I mean, the left doesn't like him, but Elon Musk is a man that's greatly admired by many, many Americans. And he also happens to be a pretty interesting fella. I mean, I think he's on the spectrum, and his public speaking skills are something he's actually worked very hard on. But it makes the point. I think he was in Pittsburgh just the other day talking about how, our ability to speak freely really is on the ballot this year. I mean, looking at that story, Elon Musk says this is war because it is. I mean, this outfit and everything about this sort of thing, it falls into a pattern. This organization is called Center for Countering Digital Hate. It's Orwellian. Everything about all of these things is just straight out of George Orwell's 1984. Their job is not to counter digital hate. It's to suppress the free expression of anybody who is in opposition to the ruling class. Period. That's the end and the only purpose of these organizations. And there are lots of them. Lots of them actually end up getting United States taxpayer money to exist and to collude with the government to suppress your speech, which I know I don't have to remind people of this, but that's unconstitutional. And if something is unconstitutional, it's also illegal. These are crimes being committed by the ruling class against the people. And for what? Not for spouting hate or misinformation or disinformation. Just the most powerful institutions on earth today are being weaponized against ordinary citizens for the sin, the crime of speaking out and criticizing the ruling class. That's what this election is going to be about, because Elon Musk has promised, I guess, if he's invited, to be part of the Trump administration if the American people get to elect him to be president. And that's going to be a very, very wonderful thing, an interesting thing. And hopefully it's wonderful, but it's going to be very interesting, because not only would we have an outsider as president, we would have an outsider who Trump wants to put in charge of making the government more efficient. He'll be the efficiency czar. I think Elon Musk will also be the First Amendment czar, ensuring that the cabal, the conspiracy between government and every other social media outlet except for X, they can't even allow that. They can't allow one social media outlet to not collude with the ruling class to suppress your speech. That is too much. And that, in their eyes, and they're actually correct, because it doesn't take a lot of free speech to take down a corrupt government. And if you allow it on X, that is a big problem for these people. And so, yes, to have it written down, it's almost mind blowing how they say the quiet parts out loud now. They seem to have no fear of being found out and stopped, because they are setting it up so that the people actually do not have the power anymore to stop them. It says it here in black and white: kill Musk's Twitter. That is a goal of the Center for Countering Digital Hate in collusion and cooperation with the government to violate the free speech rights of everybody in America. And one of the things, I'll let Chris have it go at this in a minute, but one of the real insidious things about this is that this is an American and UK suppression of speech coordination effort here going on. And we have seen videos, I've seen videos on X of all places, of police officers showing up at the door of British citizens who thought they were living in a free country to arrest them or cite them, and certainly to harass them for posting so-called hate speech on their Facebook page or something. This is happening in the United Kingdom right now, and they want that to happen here in the United States. And if this election goes the way that the Center for Countering Digital Hate would like it to go, that is going to happen in this country. There should be no doubt about in your mind that is what they aim for, and they will be able to accomplish it.
Yeah, Chris, I mean, remember the days, it weren't that long ago, when the talking point when it came to like online censorship was that it wasn't happening, and that it was all just these like made up conservative stories of us like chasing phantoms or whatever. And then it moved to like, oh no, it's just like moderation. Don Lemon talks about, we're just moderating, And now we've gotten to the point where it just says kill Musk's Twitter. So it's like, can you really blame Elon Musk for going so hard when it comes to kind of campaigning this season around? But I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
This is I think, a multifaceted topic. So first, I think a lot of Americans don't know it, but most European countries, including the UK, including Germany, do not have freedom of speech. They actually do not have a First Amendment right called the freedom of speech. So this is more or less allowed in places, like the United Kingdom and, in countries across Europe. It's not allowed in the United States of America. That's why we have the First Amendment to protect against this. And for, 230 something years, generally speaking, for the most part, we abided by that. And, I go back to, Skokie, Illinois, back in the 1970s, when the KKK wanted to have a march here in Skokie, Illinois, which has a very high Jewish population, and the ACLU and all these other organizations said actually they do have the right to do that. We're not agreeing with what they're saying, but they have the right to say that. And that's a big thing that I think is completely being lost on people's minds these days is, well, we just don't like what they're saying, so we want them to stop saying it, and we want the government to go in and prevent them from saying that. And that is just flat out blatantly un-American. On the Elon Musk thing. So, a couple of years ago, Elon Musk was actually on the left, believe it or not. He's been a leftist. I think deep down, I think he does have much more liberal tendencies than MAGA tendencies, or whatever you want to call it. But as he said as he posted and tweeted in a famous tweet back when it was Twitter. He hasn't left the Democrat Party. The Democrat Party's left him. And he had a great meme, I think, where it was like the Democrat Party's like gone this far to the left and he's still here and the Republican Party's basically still there. So it just makes sense that he would align with them. And we're seeing this happening in many other instances. We're seeing Tulsi Gabbard, who just announced that she has officially quit the Democrat Party and has now joined the Republican Party, not because she's completely changed her stances on these things, but because the Democrat Party, the left, has become such a shell of what they once were. And she has made a big deal about freedom of speech being one of the biggest reasons why she's done so. And I completely applaud her and agree with her for doing so. So, this, when I think back to Twitter before Elon Musk and back when the left had a monopoly on all the social media platforms and almost all of the mainstream media except for Fox News and a couple others, man, they love those days because they could totally set the narrative. Thank God that Elon Musk saw this happening and said, you know what, I'm going to overpay by billions of dollars for this platform, Twitter, and I'm going to make it back as to what it was supposed to be originally. It was supposed to be a place where people can just go and state their opinions. Section 230 says you cannot actually say you cannot say things that are, pornographic in nature or post pornographic images or, things like that. That's not what this is about. This is about people just having the ability to just say what they think on a public platform that is supposed to be the modern day town square. And it just drives the left crazy. And of course, it drives, the UK, the Labour Party, who's in charge there now, totally crazy. Because guess what? Everything that Donald Trump is espousing is actually going to not harm them, but it's not going to help them nearly as much as the Biden administration would. Because guess what? Unlike our modern day left, the Republican Party, the GOP, the Trump movement, whatever you want to call it, they actually care about Americans first. And I think that's what this is really about. So I'm so glad that Elon Musk had the foresight to see that this was happening and to grossly overpay for Twitter, with not because he wanted to turn it into this, profitable business per se, because I actually think he's losing lots of money off it because advertisers are leaving and all these other things, but because he said, you know what, this is essential for the maintenance of a free society. And he has followed through on that, and good for him. And I don't know where we'd be at this point in time if we did not have this, if we didn't have the Twitter files and all these other, things that have come to our attention as to how the government was, colluding and basically censoring Americans, opinions for several years. And Donnie, I almost forget that they first completely tried to deny it. The shadow banning, all that kind of stuff. No, this isn't happening. You're totally just, you're just imagining this. But we all knew it was happening. And then now that the Twitter files have come out and, all these other reports, now we have direct evidence that it was happening. So, once again, I think that it is when we, look back 10, 15, 20 years from now, we are going to congratulate Elon Musk for having the backbone to say, you know what, I'm going to buy this media platform, and I'm going to go against the grain of the leftist narrative of saying, hey, you know what, just play ball with us and everything's going to be okay. And look at how brave and courageous he is. He's got so much on the line. He's already under attack from California for a bunch of, BS. And, the guy is just, super strong and, ardently believes in freedom of speech. And thank God he's around, and thank God he put up the money to buy Twitter and keep it, a free, open platform.
Yeah, I mean, just the brazenness of having that, the words like "kill Musk's Twitter," like it's not even necessarily indicative of just like an ideology, like, oh, we just want to make sure that there's no fake news and misinformation being spread. No, it says "kill Musk's Twitter." Like that's like a personal attack at Elon Musk and what he's trying to do. But that alone, I think, is like worthy of having this whole podcast, dedicated to this idea of like kill Musk's Twitter. But the story goes further. So this expose from Thacker and Taibbi goes to show that this Morgan McSweeney, the guy that was like the founder of this Center for Countering Digital Hate, who has been instrumental in many prominent UK officials attaining office, has been advising Kamala not only on issues relating to squashing free speech online, but on the general election strategy. So, according to this report, I'm reading from the report now. In the last 2 months, the Washington Post and Politico, among others, have run a series of features about British advisors from Labor Together. That's another McSweeney creation. Rescuing the distressed political damsel that is the Harris Walls campaign. Politico casts McSweeney as a, quote, election mastermind who first helped Keir Starmer defeat leftist Jeremy Corbyn to become the head of the Labour Party, all the way to Starmer's landslide win over conservatives to become prime minister this past July, implying that McSweeney and his team can perform similar miracle for Harris. Democrats will supposedly learn from Labor Party's tactical brilliance. Again, still reading from the report here. The new British government also believes that Harris' defeat would leave Starmer alone as the keeper of the center-left flame and in worrying isolation as the Grand Atlantic Alliance's last hope. On top of providing election strategy, over 100 current and former Labor staffers have begun knocking on doors for Harris this summer, drawing howls from Trump surrogates such as Sebastian Gorka, who called it a bloody outrage. So, Jim, staffers from a liberal party of a foreign nation going door to door campaigning for Kamala Harris. That's not election interference, is it?
No, I mean one of our regular viewers here on YouTube said, "Hey, that sounds like foreign election interference." And it sure would seem to meet the definition of that. Look, this is we've talked a lot on this podcast. I know we have the new book Propaganda Wars with Glenn Beck and also with the Heartland Institute's Justin Haskins contributing to that book as a co-author about the global elites and the World Economic Forum and what we call the ruling class, the global ruling class, and how they are all coordinating together. If you would have asked me 5 years ago if we would be talking publicly on a podcast about the ruling elite in the United Kingdom coordinating with the ruling class here in the United States to suppress the speech of anybody who voices even the slightest bit of criticism of them and their policies, and to start defining everything as disinformation, misinformation, or malinformation and hate speech, and using those as justifications they want to kill Twitter, to actually absolutely destroy the public square in which people can actually speak their minds. I would have thought you were absolutely crazy and nuts. There's no way that would happen in the West, in the free world as it is today. But here we are. When the people get to speak their minds, that's a danger to the ruling class. And so they cannot allow it to happen. Chris was bringing this up too, how Elon Musk was, probably considered himself a man of the left, certainly maybe not a man of the left, but certainly a liberal, a classical liberal, that somebody who would define themselves as a liberal, say in the year, 2002. And the Overton window of politics, liberal politics and politics on the left has moved so far left that it is, you can't even see it anymore. As the Andy's bringing up that cartoon that kind of shows what has happened to the world over the last 20 years or so, and it seems to be accelerating. But it really is important. It's amazing. Well, it's not amazing. You might notice who is not reporting on this this coordination to suppress free speech, which used to be considered un-American. And the people not reporting on that are the corrupt corporate media in the United States and in Britain, for that matter. You have to get it from places like Substack or Breitbart or Zero Hedge or other blogs and places. And the fact that Elon Musk put the task of uncovering the Twitter files, he basically just opened up the database and let a liberal journalist on the left, Matt Taibbi, to dig into it and to find out what was going on. Michael Schellenberger, who we've had on this program, is a classic liberal. He would consider himself somebody, he would not consider himself a conservative. He was also unleashed on the Twitter files to find out about all the shadow banning, about all the meetings that they had. all of the threatening letters they were getting from the government saying, you need to play ball with us on this by not letting people say anything against what we think is happening in COVID or with lockdowns or with masks or any of that stuff. You better not let any of that speech happen, or you're going to be in big trouble. That Section 230 that you enjoy, maybe we're going to have to revisit that. That is called extortion. Those are crimes. And one of the most frustrating things about what we're witnessing going on in the world right now, and maybe this is why the left and the ruling class are so desperate to keep Trump out of the White House, is because a lot of what has been happening over the last couple of years are crimes. It is illegal to do these things. You're not allowed to extort a private company using the temporary power you have as a bureaucrat in the government. That's criminal. That's criminal activity. But instead, we live in a world in which people who don't commit crimes are pursued, like the Texas Rangers pursuing a criminal. If you don't commit any crimes, the government's coming after you. If you commit actual crimes, you get away with them and you just slink off and become a CNN contributor. And this goes all the way back to all the crimes that were committed when they started spying on Donald Trump's campaign and then his presidency, and then cooked up the whole Russia collusion hoax and all these other things. That we seem to have become numb to the level of corruption that is now just ensconced and definitionally what our power sources and our government are these days. We have to wake up sometimes, because it is really easy to become numb and to think it's the norm that our government sees the people as the enemy. Kamala Harris going out there talking about Donald Trump's out there calling people the enemy within. Again, everything is projection. Our own governments from Great Britain and the United States looks at the American people as the enemy to their aims and certainly to their power structure. So there's a lot on the line in this election, man.
Yeah, no doubt. And, if the Center for Countering Digital Hate sounds familiar, it should, because they released a report back in January called The New Climate Denial. Do you remember this, Jim or Chris?
Oh,
We
of course
covered
I
this
do.
on our show.
Yeah.
This accused climate realists like the Heartland Institute of profiting off the spread of disinformation and climate denial. The report accused the Heartland Institute and others for shifting from old denial, as they label it — this is the claim that man-made global warming does not exist — to the new denial, the claim that proposed solutions to dealing with climate change won't work. It's just like, can you just imagine that? Like accusing someone of being a climate denialist if they think transitioning to 100% wind and solar would be ineffective and detrimental to the economy. You're a climate denier. So after outlining the new denial, the Center for Countering Digital Hate proposed harsher restrictions be imposed on big tech companies to squash this supposed misinformation. And a few months after that report, our channel was demonetized on YouTube. And the Center for Countering Digital Hate took credit for our demonetization, posting on X, "When YouTube has demonetized the Heartland Institute, a leading climate denial think tank. In April, we led 24 organizations in calling on YouTube to enforce its climate policies." So, so every one of these episodes where I start off talking about how YouTube is demonetized us, well, you've got the Center for Countering Digital Hate, the same group that is advocating for killing Musk's Twitter, is over there celebrating that fact and taking credit for it. So, Chris, the Center for Countering Digital Hate works with government and corporations to squash free speech, but Trump is the fascist. Got it. What are your thoughts on this?
So the Center for Countering Digital Hate, I don't see the hate that they're trying to counter here. It seems like they're just trying to counter the truth, and it seems like they're trying to counter information that people want to have access to. So I think that the name of this place is just completely off base. And when you really think about it, I mean, they're the ones who are spewing hatred. They're the ones who are being the aggressors here. They're the ones who are saying, "Hey, you can't do this, you can't do that." The whole notion of just live and let live, I guess, does not apply to these people whatsoever. They want to control. They want to control all information, and it just bothers them to the nth degree that one social media platform, one out of 7 or 8 of the big boys, allows free information to flow, and they just can't take that. And we do put on this show. We talk a lot about the mainstream media and all that stuff, but if you do look at the ratings, and they're going way down. People are not watching CNN, MSNBC, ABC, CBS, and NBC nearly as much as they used to. They're turning to these alternative sources, whether it's Instagram, whether it's Facebook, whether it's X, and X, I think, plays a very crucial role in that universe, because X in real time kind of sets it's like a new scoreboard, and you can just constantly update it and see it in real time. What's trending, what's happening, what are people, thinking about these things. And that does have value. And we want it to be as open as possible. We want it to be just a place where people can, espouse their opinions and say what they like, as long as they're obviously not, saying terrible things about other people, like, go kill Donald Trump or whatever. But that's what it's supposed to be. And that is what it is, becoming again. And that's great for us, for people who want to seek the truth. But it's terrible for those people who want to control the narrative, because they feel like they've lost control of the narrative. And they're right. They have.
Yeah, well, it's a tool in a battle of information, right? And it's like when you're lining up all of the tanks of the mainstream media, whether it's the CNN or ABC or NBC, MSNBC, whatever, and they've just like kind of mowing down the competition. You've got like Fox News or like The Blaze as being these kind of outliers on the other side of it. But then you've got something massive like Twitter that like essentially shifted sides of this information battle when Elon Musk purchased it. That's a huge threat to the establishment and this institution of trying to curate the information that goes to the general public. So it has to be demolished. Hence, we have to kill Musk's Twitter. I think it's very, very obvious that that's what's going on here, and that's why I want to dedicate so much of this episode to that.
For decades now. Right. I'd say really since maybe 2000, really. The left has been the gatekeepers when it comes to the media, when it comes to the flow of information. And, that changed a lot when Elon Musk decided to pony up and buy Twitter and put his money where his mouth is. And it just drives them insane. And I think that's that's going to continue. It's not going to, they're not going to change their minds on this anytime soon.
Oh, definitely not. Yeah. And it goes for like Joe Rogan having the biggest show out there that dwarfs any other kind of media show. They're all threats to the institution that they have tried to construct over the past several decades.
Yep. Which
brings me to this new book here. This is the new book, Propaganda Wars, authored by Glenn Beck and our very own Justin Haskins. Also, you have to flip open the book to see this one, but the most important thing right there is contributor Donald Kendall right there. So Justin is actually probably currently on a flight back from Dallas, where he was down on Glenn Beck's show and various other shows in the Blaze Network talking about the book. But like I said, I'm a contributor, so I can be here and I can talk about on the book. So no worries there. So this book covers a handful of topics, but its main theme is the idea of information dissemination in the modern battleground in domestic and even international affairs, and that this information warfare is getting more sophisticated as technology advances. It's getting harder and harder for your average person to determine what is fact and what is fiction. And what we are witnessing today is an all-out assault on truth, and it's tearing the nation apart. So Glenn and Justin in this book also give readers a step-by-step guide to identifying and deconstructing past, present, and future propaganda efforts. It is also important for us to get this book out ahead of election time for reasons that I'll make clear in a minute. The book is fantastic. I can personally guarantee you that. And I just want to run through some of my favorite aspects of the book. Not to give everything away, but just to kind of whet your appetite of what you're going to get when you pick up and read this book. So the first chapter, I'm not going to go through every chapter. I'm just going to hit some of my favorite things. But the first chapter is called Welcome to Clown World. It's probably my favorite chapter name in the book. But this goes through some of the most ridiculous stories that have come out in the past few years. Like the idea that math is racist, the coverage or lack thereof of Biden's obvious mental decline, ignoring stories of Chinese spies and their relationships with certain Democrat politicians, bald, cross-dressing, luggage-stealing weirdos and how they hold significant roles of power in our government, transgender activists being made the spokesperson of beer companies, all of these just like ridiculous stories, and how the media have tried to present these stories to the general public, trying to convince them that this is all just normal. So that's the first one, just kind of showing the power of the media to try to normalize all of this just insane stuff. If any one of those stories were to happen even 10 years ago, I think everyone would reject it as just being lunacy. But here we are in 2024. There's a significant amount of attention that is paid, like I said, to this kind of emerging technologies that are having these massive effects on just the way that we consume information. One of the sections talks about super echo chambers. I'm sure most people here are familiar with the idea of echo chambers, the idea that people are only getting their news from certain sources that serve to back up their previously held beliefs. And generally speaking, this is usually seen more so as a choice, people choosing to watch Fox News or CNN, depending on where their political allegiances line up. However, now technology has advanced so much that people are increasingly getting sucked into super echo chambers. When online, much of the content that a person is exposed to is dictated not necessarily by choice, but by advanced algorithms that can know, based on what you slow down and read and click on, that you like X and Y. So it'll decide that it's only going to show you X and Y so that you stay on the platform for longer. So the book talks about this kind of phenomenon, as well as an amazing study by the Wall Street Journal that shows that sites and apps like Instagram and TikTok push increasingly radical content to people using these advanced algorithms, basically just like pushing people further and further, dividing them further and further into separate camps. There's a whole section on bots and the idea of the dead internet theory. The book goes into how much of the content and interactions online are the products of bots and otherwise fake accounts that are pushing an agenda. The book dives into a bunch of different organizations and government agencies from around the world whose job it is to manipulate online dialogue to spin narratives that help push their agenda. I think Russia's Internet Research Agency is probably the best known example of this, because you actually have the media talked about this, in the run up to the election, that they were trying to manipulate stuff. But virtually every country utilizes this strategy to one extent or another. I'm talking about Iran, I'm talking about China, North Korea, but as Western countries as well. So the book gets into that very deep. Deep fakes, a personal, interesting topic to me, is discussed pretty thoroughly in this book. We've talked about deepfakes on this show a lot. The idea that AI technology can be used to simulate a person's look and speech to create incredibly realistic fake videos or audio clips with the purpose of spreading misinformation. The book shows example after example of this and how it's been used throughout the world already to manipulate election outcomes. And that was one of the reasons why it was so important for Glenn and Justin and I to get this book out before the election, because it's basically warning that, some potential giant October surprise video that comes out might be completely fabricated because of the technology that's available now. So this is the one of the kind of the core aspects of this book is, that old saying, believe nothing of what you hear and only half of what you see. But when you take all of this technology into account and the way that the media landscape has morphed over the past couple of years, you kind of have to lower that bar even more. So now it's like believe nothing of what you hear and 1/16 of what you see. So the book is, like I said, it's fantastic. It's available now. You can Google it. You can find it on Amazon. You can go to Glenn Beck's store and order a copy today. Chris, I know that you have a copy as well, and I know that you actually started reading it. So do you have any thoughts, comments, questions so far?
Yeah, so I've gotten through chapter one. Chapter one is great. It just sets the tone, how upside down everything has become in recent years. But I do want to just kind of circle back to one of the things that you were talking about earlier. So that the notion of these echo chambers. And when I think back to when I first started really like paying attention to politics and policy and watching the news and all that stuff, I think back to CNN and MSNBC. And what they almost always had on was they would have a right person and a left person. They would let them go back and forth. On CNN and MSNBC, that almost completely just does not exist anymore. When they do have a panel, they might have one token person from the right, but they are drowned out by 5 or 6 other people from the left. Fox News pretty much kind of does the same thing, except they do have their, their people on the 5 and some of the other programs who do give the other perspective. But it just seems odd to me, and it seems like it's a bizarre twist of these new technologies because they're supposed to give us more access to information. However, it seems like the opposite is happening, and people are becoming much more interested in just seeking anything that is going to reinforce what they already think. So it's like the confirmation bias, I think, has just gone up tenfold due to these technological, updates that we've had in terms of how people can receive their news. I think the algorithms and all that kind of stuff has made it even worse. So that's why, I mean, I personally don't get my news from, social media at all. I try to, to go direct to the source, try to, get different points of view. But I can see how this is creating almost, a group of people that are just completely unaware of what's really going on because they just get this, curtailed version of what is actually happening, and it's supposed to fit everything that they already believe, and that's dangerous. Because I think back, wow, what if a dictator like Adolf Hitler, Stalin, or Pol Pot, or someone had access to this kind of information? They could completely indoctrinate and brainwash their population so much more easily than they had to do it in the old way, where it was blaring radio messages, and newspapers and that kind of a thing. So I think your book really touches upon something that is very important for the future, and it's just so strange. It's hard for me to to connect these two dots here, where the technologies that we've been introduced to in the past 10, 15, 20 years has vastly increased the amount of information that we can access. However, people's knowledge and people's willingness to dive deep into these subjects, I think, has actually gone way down. People go and they just, do a Google search, and whatever comes up first, they click on that. Okay, that's the answer. Well, no, that's not the answer. You need to really dig deep. It takes time to, analyze things, think of all the context, think of all the other things that are coming in here. So, the technologies that you talk about, the AI, the algorithms and all that, is in some ways, I think, making people dumber, which is just fascinating in a way, because you would think that the more access to information people have, the smarter they will be, because they will have, more access to all different points of view, and they can do their due diligence and do their research. That's not happening. So I think your book raises some very interesting points about the future of how human beings access information, and how we need to actually just be much more better about making sure that the information that we are receiving is in fact the truth. And that usually takes a long time, and it's intensive, and it takes a lot of effort, but it's always worth it.
Yeah, no doubt. And one thing that Glenn was very, very clear about from like day one on working on this book was that like he wanted to make sure that it was solution orientated. Yeah, he made it very clear that he didn't want to just like stand in a bonfire and say it's getting hot in here. Like he wanted to have some solutions. So it's very solution orientated. There's a lot of pointing out stuff that we talk about on this podcast a lot in the terms of what the media does, but it also kind of puts some of the responsibility on the reader to be able to figure out and use the tools that are presented in this book to be able to better figure out what is real and not real, because misinformation is not just purely, on one side of the political aisle. Like we have a responsibility as well to make sure that we're not spreading fake news and all of that and undermining our credibility. So yeah, it's a very, very important book. There's a lot of Very interesting stuff that you probably aren't going to get from your average conservative book out there that is in this book. Stuff that you'll probably would hear if you're a constant listener to this show. But you're gonna love this book. So definitely want to check that out.
Hey,
But
Johnny, just one more quick comment. So for
sure.
our viewers and listeners who are familiar with Yuval Harari, it's interesting because I just started reading Yuval Harari's book, which is called Nexus, which is kind of about the same thing, but he takes the complete opposite point of view. So it's just interesting that these books actually came out right around the same time. And
Sure.
I find it very fascinating to read both of them and to consider both, points of view. Obviously, I agree more with, what's in propaganda wars, but I think that's another example of this is don't. And I think that, all Americans should do this. Don't just read everything that reinforces your point of view. It's actually very helpful and very necessary sometimes to go and say, I want to go and see what the other side is saying, or I want to just, just read a book that's the total opposite of that. Sometimes it makes you question things, and that's a very good thing. So please,
Absolutely.
please, I just hope that is why I watch CNN. That's why I watch MSNBC. That's why I read books by, avowed leftists, because it would just be, I would be limiting myself if I were to only watch and read things that, reinforce the beliefs that I already have.
Right, you gotta sharpen your thoughts and mind against a whetstone of challenging ideas. So yeah, if you're just watching and listening to and reading stuff that agrees with you, you're actually kind of stunting your own ability to have like critical thinking and all of that. So
That is very true. Yep.
so we're already at an hour, but my sidebar prevents me from just ending the show. We have to talk about the fact that the election is only 11 days away, folks. 11 days away. So just kind of, we'll be brief on this, but just kind of branching off of the topic, I guess, that we've covered over the past couple of weeks. It really feels, I'm turning into Joe Biden over here. Really feels like the Harris campaign is getting desperate. And it seems like they're just going off the deep end. In just the past several days, Kamala and her team and the media, but I repeat myself, have accused Trump of defending Hitler, sexually assaulting some new woman 30 years ago, wishing that he had Nazi generals. I think actually Kamala Harris came out and did like a fake press conference talking about these allegations, some of these allegations that
Trump allegation has been
Hitler
completely debunked.
We have a clip of it if you want.
Yeah, okay, let's play this clip. This trigger warning, Kamala Harris about to talk. Go ahead.
Of Americans. All of this is further evidence for the American people of who Donald Trump really is. This is a window into who Donald Trump really is, from the people who know him best, from the people who worked with him side by side in the Oval Office and in the Situation Room. And it is clear from John Kelly's words that Donald Trump is someone who, I quote, certainly falls into the general definition of fascist.
Oh my gosh.
Who in fact vowed to be a dictator on day one.
Oh my gosh.
And vowed to use the military as his personal militia to carry out his personal and political vendettas. Donald Trump is increasingly unhinged and unstable. And in a second term, people like John Kelly would not be there to be the guardrails against his propensities and his actions. Those who once tried to stop him from pursuing his worst impulses would no longer be there, and no longer be there to rein him in. So the bottom line is this. We know what Donald Trump wants. He wants unchecked power. The question in 13 days will be, what do the American people want? Thank you.
Yeah. So we won't have John Bolton over there stopping Donald Trump from acting on his worst impulses of not going to war. Thanks, Kamala Harris. Jim, I mean, it's really, really starting to get pathetic. What are your thoughts on this in the last 11 days leading up to the election?
Well, I guess the upshot of this, the silver lining on that utterly disgusting and frankly, you talk about dangerous speech, that's dangerous speech. If we're going to start having those definitions, if we're going to start talking about that, that's dangerous speech. But the upshot of this is that they must know that they're in big trouble, and that Donald Trump is their own internal polling must show that Donald Trump is poised to win this election in 11 days. But it also proves to me that they really do want Donald Trump dead. They're 0 for 2, calling him Hitler, saying nobody will be there to these impulses. We went through 4 years, so now I guess the new spin is the only reason we didn't fall into a fascist hellscape under Donald Trump's first administration is because brave heroes like John Bolton and John Kelly and Mark Milley and the Joint Chiefs of Staff were there to stop him. Mark Milley is the one who was in contact behind the scenes with the Chinese Communist government behind the back of his president, and that means behind the back of the American people, to assure them, don't you worry, I'm not going to be, I will not follow any orders that this president gives because I don't believe he is legitimate. And so there was somebody in the chat wondering, who is this ruling class I am referring to? Who are these people? Those are those people. Mark Milley, John Kelly, all these people that are who decide on their own, by their own account, that the choice of the American people is illegitimate and that we will not allow the will of the people to be expressed in policy through the president that they choose. They spent 4 years thwarting almost everything Donald Trump tried to accomplish in the mandate that he got from the American people, and they will try to do it again. But using this kind of talk, it shows me that they had two plans to stop Donald Trump and to get first Joe Biden, now Kamala Harris, over the finish line to continue the regime as we know it. And that was to either throw him in jail or, and then when that wasn't working out, apparently to try to get him killed. You do not use this kind of language is really unprecedented in this country. I mean, I know. Every Republican is called Hitler. There was a great thread I saw on X that if you go all the way back to Mitt Romney was Hitler. George W. Bush, of course, was Hitler. I believe there was a website called Chimpy McBush Hitler, as a matter of fact. Every Republican presidential candidate is called Hitler. This is not new in that respect. But this is a serious attempt by them to do one of two things. I mean, I really do think if they mean it when they say these things, then what are they asking people to do? That you need to stop him. And of course, Kamala Harris says this as vice president in front of the vice presidential residence. She uses her official vice presidential account to say these sorts of things on X, by the way, and she does have free speech so she can say them. But I don't know how appropriate that is for a sitting vice president to do that. And the irony, of course, is that the ones with unchecked power is the regime in power right now. They're the ones who, do censor the free speech of Americans. Biden is the one who's locking up his political opponents, and even said on a stump for Kamala Harris somewhere, with like 20 people in the room because nobody wants to see him, that we got to lock him up, meaning Donald Trump. They're the ones who weaponize the Department of Justice and the CIA and the IRS to go against political opponents. They're the ones coordinating with the Five Eyes intelligence agencies around the world to spy on Americans because it's illegal for the Americans to do that on their own. They're the ones classifying Americans who show up angry at school board meetings because of the indoctrination and inappropriate curricula for their children and calling them domestic terrorists. So, it's Kamala Harris who wants to get rid of the filibuster. It's Kamala Harris who wants to stack the Supreme Court with about maybe 7 or 8 new leftists to make sure that the regime's agenda is never challenged ever again. Everything is all projection. And so it must be that they know that this is a sign of desperation. That's the only way I can think of this in any way that's remotely positive, is that if they're pulling this stuff out, if this is their closing message 11 days out of the election, that has to be because Donald Trump is doing very well in the polls, even in their internal polling and in the early voting. This is a disgusting turn of events in our politics. But again, if it's happening, it must be because they know that she's going to lose. I hope so.
Yeah, I mean, Chris, you've made the case on here before that things generally, when you're looking at the polls, are looking good for Trump. I think like all the swing state polls averages are looking like they're in Trump's direction. Now, in the national average polls are looking like it's in Trump's direction. We've talked recently about some of these betting websites that it looks like it's all going in Trump's direction. And yeah, when you see Kamala Harris coming out with these like just baseless accusations, just throwing anything at the wall, just like seemingly in a panic, it really starts to send that message that that campaign is flailing. What are your thoughts? Your and make them your final thoughts for the episode because we are already very long here. Go ahead.
Yeah, a couple things. Okay, so one of the key, I'd say the key swing state in this election is going to be Pennsylvania, and Pennsylvania has releases their early voting by registration daily, and it shows that Republicans are early voting or registered Republicans at a much more higher proportion than Democrats. So that's a very good sign. We also are seeing in some of these key Senate races like in Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, and some others, that the Democrat candidate is actually disavowing Bidenomics, and Biden's policies, and saying, "Well, I actually agreed with Trump on these three things. Immigration, most importantly." So that shows that their internal polling is saying, we think if we want to survive, we're going to have to attach ourselves to the Trump campaign." I don't think that's going to work, but that just shows that they're desperate. So RCP average, which I do check, every couple of days, Donald Trump is winning RCP average in every single swing state, all 7 of them. He is winning. Some of the most recent national polls show that actually Donald Trump has a 2-point national lead among registered voters. So that's another huge, bit of information. When you look back at this point in time, about 2 weeks out from the election, and you say, where was Donald Trump in 2016? Where was he in 2020? 2020, at both of the national level, Biden and Clinton had substantial leads, and in those swing states, they also had substantial leads. So all the polling that shows that Donald Trump is actually winning, like these RCP average shows us right here on the screen, I think that that's an indicator that this is going to be a landslide. I don't want to use the L word. I don't want to, prematurely, go there. But I mean, just based on the fact that there were reluctant Trump voters, both in 2016 and 2020, who voted for him, but didn't tell pollsters they were going to do so. And now we're seeing that they're actually willing to tell pollsters, yeah, I'm going to vote for Trump in all these important swing states. I can't see a scenario in which Donald Trump does not win. However, I'm going to have to say that that's all predicated. It all depends on cheating. And Donnie and Jim, as you know, we spent the past couple of years here at the Heartland Institute talking about voter fraud, mail-in ballots not being counted properly, and all this kind of stuff. I know this is, very bad for me to be saying here, but
No.
but it's the truth. And I think we have to just, put it here on the table. So, I mean, I think that is always going to be in the back of my mind. But, if that does not happen, if the election is more free and secure and safe than it was in 2020, I predict a giant landslide for Trump. I think that the Republican Party is going to take the Senate. Now, interestingly, the House, all the polls that I'm showing is that the House is likely to go to the Democrats. So that's one thing that I just can't understand. But that's what the polls are showing. That's what the betting markets are also showing, that the Democrats would win the House. So that has never happened before. In the history of our country, we have never had where the party that controls the House and the party that controls the Senate, it flips in one election. Never, ever, ever has happened. So I kind of take all those with a big grain of salt, because I do think, that the down ballot races are going to depend mostly on who wins the presidency. And if it's a Trump landslide, which I do think it's going to, turn out to be, I don't see how the Democrats would somehow take control of the House. It's just, I don't understand how that would work that way. So to me right now, I think, we're sitting well, and, come November 5th, it looks like Donald Trump is going to win the presidency, and Republicans will take back the Senate and retain the House. And if that does happen, I cannot help but wonder if there will be protests and violence and riots and all sorts of stuff, because like we've been talking about earlier in this podcast, like we've been talking about for many of these podcasts, when you label someone as a Hitler, as a dictator, as a fascist, it is going to incentivize people to not, take their win legitimately. So I'm kind of actually most interested in seeing how that all plays out. In 2020, when Biden did win, although I don't think he actually did, but he was declared the winner. I'll put it that way. It never occurred to me or anyone I know to go out and riot and protest it. It was like, okay, he won. Let's just, move forward. But I do not see that happening on behalf of our, leftist friends and foes here in the United States. And I go back to the 2016 election when Donald Trump did win, and it was very apparent that he did win, although it was a humongous upset. And I remember a lot of my, Democrat, friends just being, apocalyptic. They could not, they just could not accept it. So now I'm going to be very interested to see their reaction to, hopefully, about 2 weeks from today. I hope we know by 2 weeks from today.
Right. We got one more episode of this show before Election Day. So when we come back on a week from now, that little bottom thing on the screen there will say 4 days until election, which is kind of crazy to think about. But yeah, plenty of stuff, plenty of time, really. I mean, have we really had much of an October surprise? Kamala Harris's recent CNN town hall appearance was not much of a surprise at all. We didn't show any of those clips, but holy cow, ladies and gentlemen, if you thought the Brett Baer interview was bad for Kamala, watch some of these clips from this recent CNN town hall. It's like the campaign has to choose whether or not to hide her in a basement and not campaign, or put her out there and let her make a fool of herself. But that's the situation that we're in. Also, another big thing, Donald Trump is supposed to be on the Joe Rogan show, possibly Friday, although they might be recording it on Friday and releasing it sometime next week. Joe Rogan show is the biggest show in the world, so that's obviously a big get for him, both Rogan and Trump, I guess. So we'll see what happens in the next several days. It certainly will be exciting, and we will be covering the latest here on the In the Tank podcast. Gentlemen, any last words, anecdotes, anything you want to get off your chest before we wrap it up?
Yeah, I was going to record a video to apply to get our YouTube channel remonetized, but now I guess I can spend the rest of my afternoon doing something else. Thanks a lot, Chris.
You're very welcome.
That's right.
Donnie, I do have one last comment. So Marshall Mathers was in Detroit, where he lives, and he did endorse Kamala Harris. And I just want to say how disappointed I am, because this man, Marshall Mathers, who I respect as an artist, and he's a very good, musician, I believe, is completely out of touch with the people he supposedly represents. He's supposed to be for the working man. In 8 Mile, he worked at a factory in Detroit. If you go to Detroit and ask all those factory workers who they're going to vote for, I can guarantee you they're not going to say Kamala Harris. So Marshall Mathers, Eminem, some shady, whatever you go by these days. I know he's got, 3 different personalities, but can you please just get more in touch with yourself? Because
can the real Slim Shady please stand up?
It is so disappointing that he has sold out and just does what all the other entertainers are doing. He was once upon a time, he actually, did go against the grain. Apparently not anymore. Shame on him.
No. Shame on you. All right. Thank you all for tuning into this episode of the In the Tank podcast. Please join our show every week for when we have a new episode. For those that are listening to the audio only version, probably catching the show on a Friday or later, leave a review for us on iTunes. That would be greatly appreciated. And consider joining us a day earlier at noon Central Time on Thursdays, where we are live streaming this on Facebook and YouTube, Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it. You can join the conversation through your comments and questions in the chat. Maybe we'll show your comments on the screen. We'll address your questions on the fly. You could also follow us on Twitter or X at In the Tank Pod. You can send us your comments, questions, or suggestions for the show by emailing us at inthetankpodcast@gmail.com. You could support the show not by hitting that super chat button, because YouTube has demonetized us, but you can go to heartland.org/inthetank and donate directly to the show. That way YouTube doesn't take a 30% cut. You can also help out the show by just hitting that like button, sharing this content, subscribing if you haven't already, or just leaving a comment under the video. All those things help break through those big tech algorithms and prevent content like this from being shown to more people. Jim Lakely, where can the fine people find you?
At Jay Lakely on X, at Heartland Inst on X, and always visit heartland.org.
Fantastic. Chris Talgo, what do you have to pitch today?
This amazing book. Please go buy it and read it.
Fantastic. All right. Thank you all for tuning in, and we will talk to you next week.
think she's an idiot.